local Mexican. This place is hog heaven. I mean, I could smell that unmistakable, mouth-watering aroma clear across the market. I mean, it's a smell that says unequivocally Sunday afternoons in Mexico. It says, relax, enjoy yourself. Life is rich. It's golden, succulent pork carnitas. What exactly are pork carnitas? Well, the simple answer is that they're big chunks of pork that are slowly crisped in pork fat. But that doesn't even begin to do justice to this national iconic institution. Now, I've brought you to the Medellin market in downtown Mexico City, to a little stall that's only open on Saturdays and Sundays, because that's the time that most residents of Mexico City get hungry for little tacos of juicy pork carnitas. Now, the way that they make them is to heat that really huge cauldron, copper cauldron of pork fat, and then drop in big chunks of pork. They do the whole animal, along with some aromatic herbs, some orange, a little evaporated milk to kind of promote some of the browning. And after about 2.5 or 3 hours, the pork is really tender. They raise the temperature a little bit, and it begins to brown and crisp on the outside. This is a little side benefit of the whole carnitas making process. It's sort of become a national institution all its own. It's chicharrón. I mean, you've got the whole pig and you've got a cauldron of fat there, so why not use the skin to make a little crispy pork skin? But back to carnitas. Now, a lot of customers will come in here and order the carnitas by the kilo to take home, warm up, and serve there. But if you want that sort of over-the-top experience, I say get a fresh-made corn tortilla that's still hot off the griddle, pile on a little of the crispy pork carnitas, and I like the mixture of all of the parts of the animal, what they call the mixto, and then top it off with a little guacamole that comes right out of this meat grinder here. Boy, I'm in for a treat. Okay, so if you're like me and you think that a bite of those crispy, moist, incredibly melt in your mouth carnitas is the ultimate pork experience, well, I've got some good news for you. You don't have to go to Mexico. You don't have to buy one of those great big copper cauldrons. We don't have to wait for Sunday, because I've developed what I think is the absolute simplest but very satisfying carnitas recipe. Just go to the butcher and buy a bone-in pork shoulder roast, and then have the butcher cut it into about 2-inch slabs like that. This is a large roast, so I have 2 big slabs that are going to go into a baking dish. 9 by 13 would work good. And then sprinkle about a teaspoon of salt over the top. Then I'm going to give it just a tiny bit of water. I need about 1/3 of a cup just to barely coat the bottom of the pan. And then I'm going to cover it with foil for the first part of the cooking. I've got oven heated to 375 degrees. And I'm going to bake it for about an hour. Okay, let's take a look at what this pork looks like now. You see, basically, the pork itself is tender, but it doesn't look anything like carnitas, and it's still got a lot of juice around it there. So the next step is to raise the oven temperature up to 450 degrees, slide this back in, and after about half an hour, all of that liquid will have evaporated. So when all of that juice is evaporated, the pork will start to brown in its own rendered fat. Turn it every 7 or 8 minutes until it's crispy and deep, rich golden brown on the outside. That'll take about 20 minutes more. That takes me right back to Carnitas country. Now, as a confirmed carnivore, one of my favorite restaurants in Mexico City is this fresh, bright, modern seafood place. What's that got to do with carnitas? Well, actually, quite a lot. I mean, here at Contramar, one of Mexico's best seafood restaurants, the national craving for carnitas gets a sort of deep-sea do-over. I mean, they take big chunks of fresh tuna, cut it into smaller pieces, flash fry it until it's golden and crispy on the outside, and then serve it either in the pieces or chopped up like meat for a taco with guacamole and a little lime to squeeze on. Take a just-made corn tortilla, scoop on some of the shredded tuna carnitas. I'm gonna smear on a little bit of guacamole. Take a few of these pickled onions with habanero chili on the top of it. Now that's a mouth-watering looking taco. Now that's a carnitas preparation you might just want to tackle at home. This next one that I'm going to show you, maybe not so much. Now, the real secret to carnitas, no matter what you make them out of, is really less about the ingredients and more about the method. It's that combination of slow cooking and hot fat crisping that makes them so completely addictively appealing. I mean, just think about the French fry. It's crispy on the outside and creamy on the inside. That's the whole carnitas concept. Well, here at our fine dining restaurant, Topolobampo in Chicago, we take carnitas to a whole new world of irresistible. Now stick with me on this because the whole process is a little bit complicated. But we start with taking a big piece of pork shoulder, sliding it into a bag, adding a little bit of pork lard, fresh rendered pork lard. Then we vacuum seal that bag. Then we slide it into a water bath that's set at 143 degrees. Now, 50 hours later, we take that pork out of the bag and shred it into small pieces. Then we pack those pieces into a pan. We've lined that pan with some plastic wrap, top and bottom. Give it some weight to compact it, and then refrigerate it until it's completely firm. Then we turn that cake out, cut it into beautiful little squares, and when we're ready to serve the carnitas, we brown each cube until it's crusty and delicious on the outside. It'll be incredibly luscious and succulent on the inside. Then we serve it with a smear of Oaxacan-style black beans, a little roasted tomato sauce, a dollop of guacamole with a little wedge of lime, some pickled onions and microgreens for the perfect balance of textures and tastes. Thanks a lot, Brian. You know, this is just what I love about Mexican classics. They're perfect when you find them in a market stall. But they've got the soul, the integrity, the complexity to be transformed into amazing, pretty refined culinary presentations. And of course, we have seen that not all carnitas have to be made out of pork. But we haven't even mentioned the most obvious pork stand-in in carnitas making, duck. Just think about it, duck carnitas. Now, I'll bet you've heard of duck confit. You know, it's that preparation that starts with duck legs that get cooked in their own fat until they're moist and tender, and then they're taken out and browned until they're crispy. So, moist and tender, crispy exterior. Well, it's just duck carnitas. Now, if you want to make those, and I'm going to make them in a more Mexican style, not the old traditional French style, it starts by taking duck legs and putting them all together in a baking dish. Then sprinkle them on both sides with salt and Mexican oregano. Squeeze on some fresh lime juice, cover them with plastic wrap, and refrigerate them for 24 hours. So the next step is to take your marinated duck legs and some fresh rendered pork lard. I buy that stuff at the Mexican grocery near my house. I'm going to set the lard aside for just a second, and I'm going to cut some paper towels that I can use to dry the marinated duck legs off. They should be completely dry before we go to the next step. Okay, next, the fresh rendered pork lard needs to be melted. I'm going to put a pan there, turn my oven on to 300 degrees, and light about a medium heat underneath the pot for the pork lard. Wash and dry that baking dish, then fit those dried duck legs back into it. Then pour that melted lard over the duck legs. Make sure that they're all submerged, and scatter some halved garlic cloves over the whole thing. Nestle those down in. Then slide the pan into your preheated oven and let it bake until those duck legs are really tender. That'll take about 2 hours. Then take the pan out of the oven and let it cool till it's about lukewarm. Then take the duck legs out of the lard. Now I'm pulling the skin off of these duck legs, and I'm putting that over here in a separate plate. And then the duck leg carnitas themselves just come off in large pieces. Then when our guests arrive, well, I'm going to heat a little fat in a skillet, and I'm going to brown these duck carnitas on the outside, making wonderfully savory and tender on the inside. And in that same pan, I'm going to cook the duck skin until it's completely crispy and then crumble it up over the outside of the duck carnitas. You remember that meat grinder salsa that we saw in Mexico? That meat grinder avocado tomatillo salsa? Well, I thought it would be the perfect accompaniment to go with our duck carnitas. So I'm going to start here with some fresh tomatillos. I'm going to need about a pound of them. I've got some serrano chilies here. 4 of them will probably be good. A great big bunch of fresh cilantro. And I'm going to peel these tomatillos, taking the husk off of them first, and then cut them into smaller pieces. The tops will come off of the serrano chilies, and then I'll give those a rough chop. And I'll give a rough chop to the cilantro as well. Then I'll just put the whole thing through the meat grinder, about medium speed. Now I need to put a little chopped onion, chopped white onion, into this salsa. I never put the onion through the meat grinder because if you do, I'll tell you that the flavor of the onion will just overwhelm the salsa. It'll just chop it up way too much. So I'm going to chop this onion fairly finely, and then I'm going to collect it all in a strainer, a small strainer, and rinse it off. That'll give us the absolute best, freshest tasting onion for this salsa. So I'm going to go over here to the water. I want it to be really cold. That'll also give us a nice crisp texture to the onion. Shake off the excess liquid there, and then add it to our salsa. I think that'll be just about the right amount. Now the last thing we've got to put in there is the avocado. So cutting around the pit, I'll twist the two sides apart, lodge my knife into the pit, scoop out the flesh. Any little bits that are dark like that I can just take out, and then dice it up and stir it right into our salsa. Now, stir all of that avocado around. It doesn't matter if you stir it rather vigorously because you'll break up a little bit of that avocado, creating a slightly creamy texture in your otherwise very, very bright tasting salsa. Okay, so now I'm going to give it a little bit of salt here. Taste that and see what the seasonings are like in it. That'll go great with our duck carnitas. All we need is some warm tortillas, bowls of black beans, a little mesclun salad to go with it, and it wouldn't be carnitas without chicharrón. You might be wondering how he's going to clean up all of that cheese, or what it has to do with chicharrón for that matter. Well, this has become a Mexico City taqueria classic, and they call it chicharrón de queso, or cheese chicharrón, and in a second, you'll see why. Muchas gracias. This is the perfect thing to order when you go to a taqueria with a group of people. It's easy to break off pieces as you pass it around and kind of whets the appetite. Beyond that, it's just plain fun. So if you decide you want to tackle making chicharrón de queso at home, it's really not all that hard. All you need is a non-stick skillet and some jack cheese. Now you heat that non-stick skillet over medium until it's thoroughly hot. The heavier the pan, the easier this whole process is going to be. And then you grab some finely grated jack cheese and sprinkle it around. It'll take about 1/4 of a cup in a pan this size. And when it's all kind of melted in there, I just start swirling the cheese around in the pan until it coats everything evenly. Then once the cheese has completely melted, you'll see that the oil will start to separate out. And when all of that oil is separated out, tip it off. The rest of the cheese should stick to the bottom of the pan. Return the pan to the heat, and then the cheese that has remained in there will begin to crisp and brown just a little bit. I go in with a small spatula and just release all of the edges, and then use that same spatula to go up underneath and make sure that it's completely free from the pan, sort of like making a crepe. Then lift out your chicharrón de queso and lay it over a 2-inch diameter mold. I just use a bottle that I lay down. It's about that same diameter. Good thing these chicharrones de queso are easy to make, because I've got guests coming in just a few minutes and I've got a few more to do. So to finish up these duck carnitas, I slid them into some hot oil until they became completely golden brown on the outside, then onto a serving platter. Then I heated up a little bit more oil to fry the duck skin. When the skin was crisp and delicious looking, I drained it on a paper towel, chopped it up into small pieces, and then crumbled them over the top of the duck carnitas. When it came time to serve, I put some of those pork carnitas that I had made earlier onto the platter with the duck and served it with some black beans, the cheese chicharrón, a salad, some avocado tomatillo salsa. I think everybody was pretty happy. Every day? Well, same thing in Mexico.